No, not at all. Please do.
Okay, awesome. Now this is a commercial presentation, typically geared for commercial. Let me back up a little bit. Welcome to the webinar this morning. I'm Jason Vandiver, Building Code Program Manager for Spear. Dean Kraft he has forgotten more about concrete than I'll ever know. He's a super sharp guy and really friendly and just super knowledgeable. Certainly if I ever had a concrete question, he would be the first person I reached out to. On a side note, if anyone needs any 2021 energy code training, please reach out to me. I will drive to your city, bring everyone a code book. We can do field training afterwards if you want. All free. I'm happy to help. We recently got some funding from DOE, and I have 6 cases of code books in my garage ready to go. So just please let me know. And another thing I'm real big on right now is stucco training. About half the jurisdictions in Texas do stucco right, and about the other half do it like this picture you're seeing on my screen here. Just briefly. So stucco is not waterproof. It's not meant to be applied horizontally. Neither is Tyvek, vertically only, or at least at a 45. You can imagine this water coming off this roof into this wall assembly. Stucco will not stop that. So I'm happy. There's a fantastic stucco presentation on our YouTube channel now. If you just want to watch it at your leisure, please do that. But I'm happy to bring the gentleman that did that for us to your city. And we will do a presentation and then go out in the field. We can talk to contractors. I'm working on a Cliff Notes Stucco 101 type guide in layman's terms, non-code speak, where I'll incorporate the ASTM standards and what the code says, maybe a best practice here or there. Hope to have those done in the next few months. But we're going to finish with this picture as well. Dean, you can go ahead and share your screen if you want, but I wanted to let everybody know that those are available, as well as anything else you need, anything building code related. I'm your guy. I should probably have to stop share. For those of you, just as far as housekeeping goes, after the presentation today, you will get a course evaluation from Kathy. Simply fill out the course evaluation for your ICCCUs. We don't often have architects on the webinars, but if we do, Dean, it looks like has an AIA number for this presentation. Could you facilitate IICUs if anyone needs them? I doubt if they will.
Also too, sure, absolutely. And then also if anybody wants a certificate,
okay,
I can generate one for anybody that wants. So AIA, for some reason you had an interior designer, that's the IDCEC. Okay. For engineers, for your PDHs, usually what they want is a copy of the certificate, and we can generate that as well.
Okay, fantastic. Well, just with that, I will go ahead and turn it over with questions. Please type them in the chat or the Q&A. I'll typically hold all questions till the end. If there is one that's super relevant to a slide, I might interrupt you, Dean, but typically I'll hold them to the end. With that, the floor is yours, good sir.
Hey, thank you, sir. And actually, with questions, I actually don't mind. You see the lieutenant colonel there. I'm pretty thick-skinned. I not so much controversy or whatever, but I like the questions. If somebody has a burning question and you see it, heck, I can see the chat. I may read it myself. I may respond. And I'm just coming off a kind of a high yesterday because I was in Minnesota, like I said, and I had 20 people. And at the end of the hour, I didn't have an uproar, but we had, it was just like a group therapy session. Just everybody was engaging, and because once I got them started talking and engaging, it worked really well. So please don't hold back. Couple things. Right off the bat, been doing this for 14, 15 years, addressing moisture in concrete. Don't let the title really get you scared. I know you guys are really big on the energy compliance and things like that. But really look at this as some strategies that you could take away to apply to almost anything that you work with, you specify. It doesn't really matter, because whether it's applying to moisture and flooring, the strategies on how specifications work for anything in a building, all the strategies I'm going to talk about really span all those. So please really keep an open mind as we go through this. And then what I'll do is I'll really talk about the specification strategies. Then I will happen to use the flooring industry as an example to kind of tease out how those strategies can be applied, or the negative aspect of how things often currently work. You see a lot of letters after my name, CSI, Construction Specification Institutes. You can see some certifications there. ASTM. I'm going to talk bad about some ASTMs, but in full disclosure, I'm on the committee that writes those standards. I am the author of ASTM F3191, which is the most current one, ASTM for installing, that pertains to installing flooring. I have 2 more ASTMs currently under ballot within the flooring industry, and another one under ballot within the roofing industry. So not only are we a manufacturer of product, my business partner right now is at FCICA, Flooring Contractors Association. We're also trying to affect change within these organizations, hopefully positive change. Not necessarily just promoting our product, but literally trying to point out very specific things that are currently being done process-wise, that slight changes could really better benefit. And again, that might apply to a lot of things. Like Jason showed the picture of the overhang leading into that stucco, that slight outcropping protrusion from the side of the building. That's just a disaster. That's a disaster waiting to happen. And I don't know what would have caused that person to think that was a good idea, even aesthetically. But again, a lot of things happen for failed processes. We are a manufacturer, but you're not going to know that until I get to the very end. So now, specification strategies, that's what we're going to talk about. Course description. This slide deck, another thing, this slide deck is fully available to anybody that asks. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. If you want to copy the slide deck, before I move on, that is my direct email address. Feel free to reach out to me. If you want a certificate, if you want to copy the slides, please ask. I will send them straight to you in PDF format. So please don't hesitate. Course description, not going to belabor disclaimer or the learning objectives. So I'm going to jump right into it. Is this course for you? Like I said at the beginning, specification strategies, the very first bullet. If you specify anything, if you deal with specifications, if you deal with project contract documents, then I would argue there's some strategies in here that definitely pertain to you. It might be a refresher. So, please, tune into that. Otherwise, because they eliminate concrete moisture, concrete slabs with flooring, or if you've ever had an issue or been involved with a project that's had a delay due to concrete moisture, then I would offer that this has some benefit for you. Okay, so when we go into it, first of all, I want to say, okay, specification. When we think about a project document, and we think about AIA 201 general conditions, and we think about any commercial institutional project out there, specifically in the design, bid, build, project delivery process, you have that specification, the drawings, and so, but what are they? We think we know where they are. It's a big, 7-8 inch thick, high volume that nobody ever reads unless something goes bad. But really, what is it? And there's a description of it. And if you look on the back of the specification practice guide, it explains that it's that written communication of design intent to fulfill a specific project requirement. So what does that mean? Well, actually, if you dig into the literature, all those things are actually further explained. But it's a written communication from the design team, literally to the contractor, I'll bet through the owner, to explain what the owner wants. So that's what it is. It's, first of all, it's a written communication to explain what the owner wants. Now, if you look at the AIA 201 general conditions, a lot of project documents, a lot of projects rely on the general conditions, or they'll use the engineering version. But in that document, it clearly states that the architect and their consultants, many of you may fall into that category on the consultancy side, are deemed the author of the project specification. So what does that mean? Well, in one measure, it means that the architect and the consultants, they own that spec. So a project owner can't say, well, hey, you designed, a KFC for me, so now I can take those plans and I can use those exact plans and not pay you again and reproduce that KFC, 20 times. No, you own, that's what that means. However, it also means by the plain language that you're the author. It means you wrote it. So it doesn't mean then where you get the information from to put into your consultancy, your package, your specification. You wrote it. So you could use it from straight from a building code. You could use it from your copy and paste loss project. You could use it from a design manual. You could use it from, pull it from a commercial guide spec. It doesn't matter. Once it goes into a named project, you wrote it. That's what that means. Now, as such, specifically again in design, bid, build, but even in design build, there's elements of where the Spearing Doctrine comes into play. And what that means is the bidding contractor has the expectation and the right to expect that that document is complete and accurate. That if you left something out, it's not their requirement. It's not their responsibility. They can't help be accountable, especially if it leads to delays in construction or change orders and increased cost. So that's really what the spec is from three different perspectives. It's a written communication of design intent. It's a legally binding contract where the architect is the author of that language. And it's a safety net for the contractor who expects it to be correct. So what kicks off the whole process of design? Well, somebody decides to build something. That could be repurposing new construction. That could be third-party tenant filled out, ground up. It doesn't matter. Somebody decides to build something for a particular purpose. And so that's what kicks off this whole design process of the specification. And the reason why I go through that is just to show how early on in the process that the owner is supposed to convey to consultants, architects, engineers, what it is they want this building to do. What is it? What is the function? What is the, obviously aesthetics as well, but what is the function? What is their design intent? And what are those criteria that they want that project to fulfill? So really, if you think then back about the definition of what a specification is, doctrinally, the owner is supposed to convey that as early as project conception. And the literature tells us that is so important because if the owner struggles or is ineffective or is incapable of clearly explaining to you what he or she wants, it could absolutely affect the overall success of the project. And actually, the higher the meeting of the minds between individuals like yourself and what the owner, the municipality, whoever the owner is, the more that understanding occurs, the higher probability of success. And obviously, the less that is understood, the greater probability that there will be an unsuccessful project. And success in any kind of project really boils down to three metrics: on time, within budget, all claims resolved. And I kind of like that all claims resolved by saying the owner, the city, the municipality, the town, whatever, getting what it is, what they wanted, what they expected, the requirements met for their project. But again, on time, within budget. So if that project conception is not clear and it leads to faulty documents, obviously all things, fall away. And where it really manifests then is when the contractor gets those documents, then they're more probable to bid incorrectly. They're more probable to underestimate the time because something was left out. They're likely to underbid the cost because something was left out or something was not considered or taken into account, and therefore change orders, extra costs, extra time, failed project. Okay, so specifications. These next two slides will boil down to, regardless of what you deal with or where you integrate into it, some really important things to keep in mind when it comes to a specification. Remember, obviously, that the architect and their consultants are the authors and all that entails. Yes, you own it. However, it means you wrote it. Doesn't mean if you copied and pasted that, well, I got it from this. Nope, you wrote it. That's what that means from a legal context, from AI, the general conditions. Next, now this probably comes more into play specifically with a lot of the products or systems that y'all might deal with. Just because a product or system or process is inexpensive doesn't mean that getting it incorporated into your project is also inexpensive. And I'm not sure if any of y'all have ever been through the VE process. I'm being tongue in cheek. I'm sure all of you have the quote unquote value engineered process. But a lot of times I feel that not all those costs are taken into account. A lot of times the simple acquisition cost is taken into account when comparing, theoretically apples to apples, and the time necessary to incorporate that system or process or material into the project is not also taken into account. As an example, say you have a process system, product, whatever, A, and you're looking at two, there's A and B. And A has a low acquisition cost, and say B has a 10% premium. Now, if it's $100, nobody really cares. If it's 500,000, maybe somebody's going to care, and the higher it goes, people are going to care more. But what I'm getting at is, it's necessary to dig a little deeper, because what if it takes 3 times as long to install option A as compared to option B? Well, that fundamental element of time then must be valued, taken into account. So for instance, for like building a closure, to making sure that continuous air barrier, and I don't sell those, I'm just kind of throwing that out there. A lot of companies that are involved in that space, they have a continuous air barrier where all the products mesh together. They're designed to mesh together for the penetrations, going around the windows, everything meshes together. And then there are other people trying to pick and choose and try to meld different systems, products on site. And almost invariably, the full system has a higher acquisition cost. However, when it comes to installation, integration, testing, support, it becomes a much cheaper option. So again, that's really important to go through all that. And I can give you a simple example on that right there. Materials inexpensive. On let's say for flooring products, a lot of times it'll say it'll mention 3 or 4 different product names for a patch material or skim coat for concrete, and nobody will dig into those particular materials. And so what is the subcontractor going to do? Well, you gave them 4 options. Do you think they're going to bid with the most expensive? No, they're going to bid with the cheapest that meet the requirements of your project. But some of the products used to level, smooth out the imperfections of concrete require that concrete surface to be absorptive, porous. Most machine troweled concrete is non-porous. So that if they bid that lower price material, that material might then say, if the substrate is non-porous, profile bead blast so you can create a mechanical bond. Well, you just added $1.50 a square foot plus several weeks, depending on the size of your job, to create that profile, as opposed to stepping them back from a system process and thinking, well, the concrete's being placed, it's going to be machine troweled, it's going to be non-porous, so let's make sure the options we give are already suitable for a non-porous substrate. Now we've eliminated that unknown, and the bids will come in more in line. And if the manufacturer, if the installer tries to submit something that does not comply, then it would be on them to pay the difference. Guide specs. Here's one for you. Bias in either manufacturer's guide specs or even commercial guide specs. Because let's face it, if you use a commercial guide spec, where do you think they got their information from? They got it from the manufacturers. And this comes straight from the doctrine to spec writers. Be careful of bias. Now, why would bias exist? Well, think about it. Organizations, regardless of the organization is, whether it's a manufacturing organization, whether it's even Spear, they grow to have their own bias, their own self-interest, their own marketing, their own substantiating their existence and continuation. And so when the people work in there, they're going to write those documents in that manufacturer's interest. So that guide spec is going to be written from their perspective, what's in their best interest. And let me give you a very, very simple example back to flooring. Normally in all flooring specs, in part 2, the standard language will be installed per manufacturer's instructions. People say, well, that's fine. We want to follow so we get their warranty. But is it really that the best case of the project? Or it'll say, more minutely, it'll say selected adhesive as recommended by the manufacturer. Again, this commentary about all warranties, system compatibility. I'm like, well, okay, but what you don't know is that probably 85 to 90% of the commercial adhesives available in the United States are made by two different companies and private labeled under innumerable different names to flooring manufacturers. So you can go on a project and you can have several different names on buckets of glue, and it could all come from either Taylor or Mapei. So the idea that it has to be from that manufacturer may not be well in the best interest of that project. It may maybe just really be driven to drive an extra SKU for that manufacturer. Also, too, reference standards. This is one I think would really come into play with your organization and what you guys and gals deal with. Reference standard. When a standard is referenced in a project specification, it has the same legal effect as if that entire reference was copied and pasted and put into that project manual. So you could reference an ASHRAE code and just reference the ASHRAE code itself, like under HVAC or something, and you can drop that ASHRAE code in there. Well, if that ASHRAE code happens to be 17 pages, you've done the same legal effect of pasting. In the flooring world, ASTM, if you reference an ASTM, prepare the concrete surface in accordance with ASTM F710. F710 is 4 pages long. Install per manufacturer's instructions. Armstrong's flooring instructions in total exceed 300 pages. So those 4 little words, install per manufacturer's instructions, could have the legal effect of sucking in over 300 pages of instructions that people are not aware, or they're forgetting the legal implications of the reference standard. There's nothing wrong with specifying by reference standard. The key is you got to know what that standard says. And is it really what is in the best interest of your project? Because remember, going back to what the spec is what the owner wants and expects. And sometimes there's things in these guide specs or instructions from the manufacturers that don't really fit their particular project. And that leads me to the last one. And I think a lot of people struggle with this right here. And again, this is the body of knowledge. This is written to the spec writer, the project architect, the designer, the project engineer.
And Dean, I'd love to give me just a half a second to reiterate. So the code inspectors on the call today, when you're required to inspect, again, I'm on a stucco rant right now, so I apologize. When you're required to inspect stucco per the code, well, it references ASTM C968, and there's a half a dozen ASTM. So it's quite literally hundreds of pages of installation instructions, not the 3 paragraphs out of the
correct code. That's the legal effect. Correct. And a lot of people don't know that. And so one of the ways to go back and support you guys being inspectors is absolutely critical, is know the standard. And it's amazing how that could make your job so much easier and actually so much more powerful. Just Friday, I got an email from a project in Lakeland, Florida, from one of the largest installation contractors in the country, their Florida division. And she said, hey, can you show up next Wednesday? Because we're going to do the pool test, or Thursday, the pool test on the flooring. We're going to spread the glue on Wednesday, and it's a 24-hour wait, correct? And she CC'd the entire project team. Well, the guiding standard is ASTM F3311, which says very clearly, paragraph 8.9. I don't know I know the top of my head because I just wrote the article, wrote the response Friday. It's like, well, thanks very much, but the standard wait time is 72 hours from the time the flooring patch is put down before the test is actually done. Why? Because the glue has to have time to properly cure before you put a stress on it. But here's one of the largest, a member of one of the largest installation contractors for flooring in the United States, but their Florida division either did not know that or assumed that nobody else did not. And not only did she throw that out there, she included the entire project team. So what did I do? I very graciously replied all. I attached F3311. I said, thank you very much. Appreciate the invite. I can absolutely show up. However, the standard is actually 72 hours unless the manufacturer. Please see attached F3311, paragraph 8.9, which is reproduced below. That was Friday. Today is Wednesday. I've not heard back from her since. So, I mean, and, you know, about code compliance, let me give you an example of code compliance from a personal experience. Not saying that anybody would do this. Lived in Rochester, New York. I don't know if anybody's in New York up there. Well, New York has insane property taxes. And I guess the code inspector was actually in a way trying to help me out. But we lived in a 1955's home, and we had a basement, a lot of basements up there. So we wanted to try to expand our living space because it was, I don't know, literally 995 square feet in a 3-1 upstairs. We're trying to gain 600-700 square feet downstairs. So we had it gutted to the masonry block. We tried to put a parge coat for waterproofing. We backed off 4 inches with the studs to create like a vapor space, trying to do, you know, a lot of stuff that you guys do. Then the drywall, put HVAC down in the whole building to create, you know, keep moisture movement, because there was no positive nor negative side waterproofing. And we had CMU blocks as a basement, literally, that efflorescence would just come through so much that my wife would vacuum the walls. What I'm getting at, though, is the roof, the ceiling and the joists were so low that there was nothing we could do. So we actually attached the drywall for the ceiling straight to the floor joist. In other words, we maximized literally every possible millimeter we could to maximize the ceiling height. The code inspector comes, the building inspector comes for the to permit and says, well, this doesn't meet code, so this won't count for living space. Well, prior to their arrival, I had looked up a New York code, I had downloaded, I had it printed, and it said that yes, it had to be a minimum of, say, 6.6 feet, unless it was not possible. Then the homeowner had to take every chance, every effort to maximize the floor to ceiling height. I said, we have thin drywall attached straight to the roof joist. We meet this category. And the inspector said, true, but I don't agree with that code paragraph. Okay, so there's a personal one. Okay, there you go. So, all right. So again, for back to this right here, reference standards, I would offer, just like the stucco rant, I would offer that most of the people you're inspecting aren't aware of that top bullet right there. And a lot of things that you're going to have to defend, you know, your position is going to be the way it's written right there in the specifications. And again, now I'm going to start delving more into the flooring side, how it can manifest on one side. And there's a lot of different references out there, and you have your own. You have ASTMs, you have ASHRAE. It doesn't matter. You have your building codes. All those things that a lot of the spec writers throw out there, they put in there, oh, per da 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 da, not realizing that they have just either saddled with or forced that project to comply with, not even understanding what those documents say. And rest assured that the contractor, they're not reading those documents. They're looking to cobble together, you know, get past the 1 year and move on. Kind of like the example we were talking about before we started. And it could be institutes or associations associated with whatever it is. Like here's Carpet and Rug Institute, F710 is an ASTM, both written by the flooring industry, Resilient Floor Institute, manufacturer's instructions. And again, oftentimes people don't realize this, but if you start, you know, scratching it and thinking about it, what people are going to these different committees and writing these things. And I can tell you from the ASTM committee, it's the flooring industry. And who writes the Carpet and Rug Institute? The Carpet and Rug industry. Who writes the Resilient Floor Covering Institute? The Resilient Flooring industry. Who writes the manufacturer's instructions? Same thing. And also, as you build up and build up and build up, even from code compliance, who do you think is likely to send most people to those codes to try to shape them to their best interest? So don't think that it's not the manufacturers behind. And then again, this last one, Who has the time to read all these? But again, once it gets into the specification, it becomes a requirement. So now we're going to drill down to more specifically how it can impact. There's the stucco example. But just as I go through this, think of anything your own pet peeve, where it's HVAC, whether it's if you're more involved with commercial, continuous air barriers, whatever it is, roofing. All penetrations must be sealed. And actually, if you dig into the roofing ASTMs, sealed and tested. All roofing penetrations must be sealed and tested. How often does that occur? How often has the contractor already covered up the concrete roof deck before the code inspector or the building or the roofing inspector gets out there and sees the condition of the concrete? A lot of times that's skipped over. But if you want to keep, if you're concerned about energy with a project with a concrete roof deck, you got to be up there before they cover it. You have to be up there before it, because all those penetrations, it's not, and through stack effect, through humidified air in the interior spaces under pressure being pushed up into the roof system through penetrations, condensing. Now in Texas, it's probably not a big deal, but if you have cause to deal with higher elevations or more northern climates, it's a huge deal. In your area, it could be a reverse effect where you have all that high heat actually then being able to flow back inside and putting greater load, because the roof deck penetrations have not been sealed before they put, I'm talking about a built-up roof, before they put a polyiso or put the membrane down, etc. So there's an example for roof. So it doesn't matter, just keep it in mind. And what we're talking about here is a test. For instance, for flooring, basically everything you walk on has a required moisture test embedded into the specification. And it's one of these tests like this right here. And so now we're going to drill down to, does the test even make sense? And again, if you're out there doing these inspections, and you want to affect change, one of the ways is like, listen, we're required to do some kind of test. It literally has no bearing on what it is we're trying to achieve. If that's the case, then try to seek and do change. And that's one of the things we've done in my company is approached it that way. And that's the process for process. Yeah, I know the code says this, I know the approach says this, but is it really the best process? Or is there another process that we can do? Then try. It may be a long, slow, difficult, painful slog, but it's worth it to improve the process. So here's an example of moisture tests. The flooring industry has gotten these tests codified across every single project out there. All projects, all concrete slabs, regardless of age of elevation, have to be tested for moisture. And these are tests were developed by the flooring industry. And it goes back to 1998. Those are the years right there that first became mandated. So we're at 24 years now. All I want to point out when we get to efficacy is, does this process even make sense, is to focus on the shape and size of these tests. The one on the left is about 18-inch by 18-inch. So about the size of an old VCT. Think about an old diner, old school, or whatever, the old smaller VCT. That's about the size of that dome. The one on the right, all those pieces fit inside one another, less than a diameter of a quarter. I know COVID, we're short on change, but you remember quarter, find a quarter, less than the diameter of a quarter. I still don't know why we're short on change. I don't understand that connection, but less than the diameter of a quarter. The only reason why I point out these dimensions is because the standard states that you have to test 3 for the first 1,000 square feet, 1 per 1,000 square feet after that. So let's make the math easy, 1 per 1,000 square feet. So 18 inches by 18-inch square per 1,000 square feet, or less than the diameter of a quarter per 1,000 square feet. So in your process kind of mindset, how, if you're testing less than a quarter per 1,000 square feet, how does that have relevance to the other 99.999% of that surface area? It makes no sense whatsoever. And that language also includes for the test that the space must be acclimatized. How often are you asked to go do a test or an evaluation that the conditions really aren't where they're supposed to be for you to conduct your evaluation? With
So the
this test, it happened.
manufacturer's installation instructions would trump all of this, right? Because that, I mean, some of that just can't happen.
Well, the problem is this is the catch-22, and you're absolutely correct, because the manufacturers wrote F710, they wrote this requirement, they wrote the test. This language is in their language as well. So from the get-go, the manufacturers for flooring, again, they control the master spec language, they control the standards, the ASTM standards, the test standards themselves, the requirement to test, and their own instructions. So they basically control it all. They also know in a process, like you just said, projects most likely cannot meet this right here. Most likely that permanent HVAC is not going to be on before moisture testing begins. In effect, though, that's what the standard says. So now, not only does testing less than a diameter of a quarter per 1,000 square feet make literally 0 sense, as a process in design, to require a project to meet this condition at some unknown point in the future also makes no sense, because the gross majority of projects will not be able to. So now you start seeing the insanity that's built into some of these processes, so that if you don't change the process, you just, doing the same thing over and over again and wondering why. So
Am I cynical, or is it not insanity at all, but genius by the manufacturers?
it's
because when
well,
they go to court, the attorney, they didn't follow the, I mean, is it all a litigation is the backbone of all this?
Well, if you looked at my, I would argue point blank, yes. In one of the conclusions of my dissertation, because I got my doctorate in business and I finished in 2017, but my dissertation was on just this subject, and it was the fallacy of the flooring industry's approach, to assessing concrete moisture before installing flooring. It seems like a really long and tedious title, but it really was breaking down the process. In one of my conclusions that I found inescapable was what you just said. There is no way, literally no way, once you see all the documents, that industry does not absolutely bear significant culpability in the continuation of this process, because they own it. And then what it allows is what you just said. Because remember, one of the standard phrases in a specification is install per manufacturer's instructions. That has the same legal effect of sucking in everything I'm showing you. So not only does the GC not even know what all that is, but you can sure as hell bet that they're not going to meet it all. So already in design, the manufacturer for flooring is protected 3 ways to Sunday.
Yeah.
Now, follow it through as a process. When it comes to flooring, after testing, what happens? Well, you spread something on top of it. You put some glue down. You put that patching material I talked about. All that material is significantly water-based. I don't know if you've ever seen a self-leveling compound go down, but they mix in a 50-gallon bucket. And in fact, the literature shows, going back to 2006, there was enough adhesive water in these adhesives that if there's any residual unreacted alkalis at the near surface of the concrete, because you need a solution to be able to measure pH, that if there's too much water in the glue, it can actually cause those alkalis to go into solution, and then literally that elevated pH liquid will turn around and attack the glue that precipitated it and cause the floor to fail. This is a known, proven potential. Further, if you just tested a dry concrete slab and then you spread water on it, what then does that do to the moisture test that you just did? Blows it away, because you just rewet the concrete. You just rewet the concrete. Now, going on with this insanity, these tests are only valid for the exact location. It is not because I say so. This is direct copy and paste from the standard itself, which the flooring industry writes. gets embedded in the spec. It's required to do. So all these projects across the planet, traipsing down this path of waiting for that probe on the right to get below 85%, 80%, so they can, quote, install their floor safely, when only that the test is only valid for that point in time, telling you that it's not a predictor of some future failure, and it's only available valid for that exact location, telling you that the rest of your, that 99.999% of your project is not tested. So then again, that's your second get out of jail free card, because you didn't test that area. And it also is the third get out.
It's funny. It's so
Well,
ridiculous. Oh my
Well,
God.
here's the third get out of jail free on this one. Then you spread glue, then you put floor down. So if it fails in the future, the very first thing the floor industry is going to do is going to drop a probe in. It's going to be higher because of the adhesive or the underlayment. They're going to blame moisture, but the moisture could have come from their product. This doesn't tell you where the moisture comes. It just tells you the moisture change. And then you go into what really sets this process off. Again, I'm talking about specification strategies. I'm carrying it through the flooring industry as an example, but we're still in design development. But this is what's being set in motion by this language. Okay, so in design, if we're requiring a moisture test to pass, well, when does the clock start ticking that we can even start getting that moisture out? A lot of people say, well, date of concrete placement. No, the literature has been very clear for 16 years. It's the date of last wetting. That's what dries the concrete out. That's what drives it. BJ, you're absolutely correct. You said they write the standard, the rules, and the instructions. You know, absolutely, absolutely. And if you carry it a step further in what you do, and you think about, I was talking to an architect yesterday, kind of he was really into spray foam insulation of the walls, and they were being required to put it near the interior. I guess he was worried about VOC or off gassing, and also too where the like the slab and the wall met and how that detail was done. And he was talking about the code, and these politicians are putting these requirements in. And I'm like, well, have you considered joining the committee to try to influence? He goes, nobody's going to pay me to do that. They've got 12 meetings a year. He goes, I can't. And I said, but the manufacturers can. They can send people there. And so it's the date of last wetting. Remember, we're specifying a process in design before we break ground, before it's going out to bid, all predicated on when the concrete is last wet. So a complete unknown. So one of the major things spec writers are supposed to not do is specify something that is unachievable. So in design, the flooring industry has written a process that requires a moisture test based on a future unknown condition, because you can never know when that last wetting is going to be. And this right here says when the building gets watertight. Well, what about leaks? What about a pipe burst? What about paint? What about drywall? Both of those operations put a lot of humidity in the space. So the concrete doesn't really start drying until the HVAC's turned on. Well, the owner doesn't want the HVAC turned on until, right before substantial completion. So it's really drying out that space. So again, another insanity for the process, all chasing something. And they've done tests. It takes 13 months in a non-controlled space. And they even did it at 7 months in a controlled space on how long it actually takes concrete to dry. But that's like lab-crete, perfectly controlled. Again, so when we think about the damage to the construction industry, this tiny little process I just went through to you, the overall damage to the construction industry. Remember, this all got set in motion to design. Now this young lady's looking at a project schedule. So where does that moisture test occurs? Well, obviously, if you're a roof inspector, or if you're air barrier inspector, or something like that, please, and it's a concrete roof, be up there before they cover that roof. Please, please, please look at the roof before they touch that concrete. Be up there and look at that concrete and where their behinds out on the penetrations. So this right here, that moisture test is going to occur right before flooring. Well, in a project, where does that occur? Does that occur At the beginning? No, of course not. So if she's looking at her project schedule, if it's a short project, concrete's the upper left, flooring's bottom right. If it's a big schedule, concrete's way scrolling up and left to the top to the left. But again, that moisture test is going to be right before flooring. Flooring often occurs right before substantial completion because the contractor doesn't want the other trades dragging crap all over the floor and damaging the floor. And so that tiny little failed moisture test can actually derail overall project delivery. So think about, y'all build schools pretty big down there in Texas. We're doing one right now in Lubbock. Say you got a 500,000 square foot high school going in, right? Okay. And so the GC's got on their schedule to start flooring in May. And then somebody drops that little moisture test in. Oh, you got high moisture. Well, the average cost for moisture mitigation topically applied after the fact runs about $6 a square foot. Okay, Mr. Contractor, I can't install the floor, but I can fix that for you for $6 a square foot. That's $3 million. So I know you guys build big schools again down there in Texas, but I'm pretty sure that any municipality is going to frown at a $3 million change order when they're looking to open that school in the fall, 3 months away. So now we have what's called the hostage situation. So now that school, that community has to have a decision. What are they going to do to move forward? Otherwise, it's a bust. All now a further point that has been known since 2004 that the most widely used test, RH for concrete, isn't even associated with adhesion of flooring to the concrete. And yet it is perpetuated in every single project. So all chasing something that, if you actually read the manufacturer's warranty, an issue that they don't cover. So let me just finally round out the insanity. So you talked about, you mentioned earlier on, it sounds genius to protect their exposure. Let me double down now. They never had exposure for the issue to begin with, because in their warranties, they have exclusions specifically removing any liability from moisture from any source. So what then can happen in a specification? Let me show you the ramification of 4 words. What does that mean? Remember. What does that set in motion? Here's a popular rubber flooring product often used in healthcare. This is a cut and paste from a variety of pages of their installation instructions. Notice that they dictate exactly what test you can use, only the RH test and the limit. Then it says, if the results are high, look at those words in yellow, must not proceed. Remember, install per manufacturer's instructions, sucked all this in as a contractual requirement. So now the contractor cannot proceed. They either keep testing and pass, or they must use an F3010 2-part epoxy, most expensive method to treat moisture before they can proceed. The decision whether or not the concrete substrate is suitable is actually put into the hands of the installer, the subcontractor, based on the contract language. And then they even say, no, you can't use a different glue either. Otherwise, we're going to void our entire warranty. All for an issue that they themselves clearly do not cover, expressly exclude in their warranty. Even after they told you what test, what limit, how you have to address, who makes the decision, what you can't do. And by the way, they're on the committee that writes all those standards. Same thing, almost duplicative from a major resilient manufacturer. A lot of schools use this kind of flooring, almost the exact same verbatim. So you mentioned before, their instructions cover them. Yes, 100%. Because remember, all this is built on processes, tests that they also wrote and control.
Has it ever gone to court where an attorney has brought up the fact that you specify things that aren't realistic, so you are?
Yes, that has, I can't quote something in a broad perspective, I can, if you look at the CSA specification practice guide, which is one of the few bodies of knowledge for a spec writer, project architect, project engineer, it clearly states, do not specify unachievable requirements.
Yeah.
It's don't do it, because remember, this is a legal contract between the GC and the owner. So the architect or their consultant is now requiring the contractor by legal contract to achieve something that they literally cannot achieve. And if the contractor by Spearing Doctrine has the absolute right to expect that those contract documents are accurate and complete, that's not going to follow the contractor. That's going to go straight back to the owner. Now, if the owner wants to take it out on the architect, that's up to them. But something like this, the contractor can say, hey, you said most something I can't. In design, you should have known, one, that I can't achieve it. Two, it's not even designed to address the issue at hand. Because even if I do all this 100%, there's still no warranty for what you just put me through. So there's two major things here. One, it's not achievable. Two, it's not even relevant. And let me give you, it's not in this presentation, but let me give you the financial ramifications of this process right here. In 2008, what was the economy doing in 2008? Just coming out of the mortgage meltdown, not doing so good. What was the construction industry doing? Dying. Yeah. $300 million on moisture mitigation for new construction in 2008. 300 million. By 2015, it was estimated that number was up to 2 billion. A 7 times increase in 7 years. And recently, last year, it was estimated to double again to 4 billion. All for a process designed by an industry that's likely not achievable. Irrespective, it's not even relevant nor warranted. There you go. So just apply it to anything you guys are out there inspecting or looking into, and step back and say, okay, should we be doing this way? If you want to do a change, you got to make a change. Remember the impact of the specs. Remember what the specs say. Remember, everything you deal with had a preparatory requirement. Like, for instance, flooring, it's embedded, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. That's the ramifications. There you go. Unattainable standards. Avoid it. That is a direct quote from the CSI specification practice side. Don't require something that you can't attain. Literally, all you're doing is costing your owner more money. And I'm pretty sure that if I gave this presentation to a jury and showed these documents, pretty sure that they would conclude, based on the published literature, that it's not attainable. And by the way, too, this idea of standard of care, well, we just did it because everybody else does it. That doctrine has been challenged more and more as well. So even that will not protect necessarily the design team. So these are all preparatory actions right here. So that last one, just because the manufacturer tells you to test for moisture, the manufacturer doesn't write the spec. The design team does. If necessary, take it out. Take it out. And if you're going to specify by standard, you better know the standard. And that really what comes to, a lot of you for inspections and things like that, that really obviously know the code, know the standard, know the reference standards, because you have a code that references a standard as the same thing. Know that too. And understand too that then not by code, they can't just code, but anything manufacturers or the design team can change. Yeah, the manufacturer had a moisture test, but we took it out. We're not moisture testing. Design team has 100% right to do that. 100%. Absolutely. You do not have to incorporate the full standard. You can incorporate just the portions that you want. You can absolutely do that. So specification strategies. First of all, everybody's worried about warranties. Just require them up front. Manufacturer will warrant they made the product correctly. That's all they warrant anyway. And if you want to feel nice, be nice, you can put something in there and say, yeah, we understand that you don't warrant for moisture. This is exact language that one architect actually I know of put in place to start changing the process more in favor of the owner.
That's
To
smart.
remove this. What's that?
That's smart.
Well, think about it.
Yeah.
The spec has a section in part 1 for warranties. Sometimes the architect uses it, sometimes they don't. Why? Because they usually get the guide spec from a manufacturer, whether they know it or not. But there's nothing, it's an absolute acceptable technique in part 1 for the architect, designer, whoever to say warranty. Standard manufacturing defect warranty shall convey, period. Why? It became a legal contract. If the manufacturer of flooring does not want to comply, what could they do? Not sell their product to that project. Contract works both ways, right? But the same thing goes for installation. There's a lot of things an installer can do to screw something up. I'm sure some of y'all out there have probably substantial experience in like, that's not the way you do this. Okay. So the designer can also put that in there. Installation and workmanship warranty shall convey. Because when it comes to flooring, there's a lot of things the flooring contractor can do to screw up the install. They could spread the wrong glue. They could not have the space acclimatized. They could not test whether the substrate is porous or non-porous. They could not clean the substrate. The slab could be too cold. Whatever. I mean, everything I'm throwing out is known failures that we've dealt with, that we've gone into. Like, yeah, your slab's too cold. What do you mean? Your slab is 50 degrees, and that glue says 65 degrees. Well, why does that matter? Because that glue says 65 degrees, and it's water-based. And the colder water gets, all those molecules start slowing down, not moving, kind of going to sleep. Your glue's asleep. What do I do? Warm your concrete. They got it to 61 degrees. We did the bond test. Everything was fine. True story. So again, it doesn't matter. Installation workmanship, there's lots of ways the installer can screw up anything. But this one right here, we're talking about moisture, except moisture, we realize that's not your issue. Then lastly, for liability. For this particular strategy for concrete moisture, remember, this is specification strategies to eliminate concrete moisture. Now, this is how you round it all together to eliminate the concrete moisture. In design, specify a process that specifically addresses it. Start off with either in the concrete spec, put an additive in the concrete that's warranted 100%, use a glue that's warranted 100%, or just go and specify a topical system that's warranted 100%. In other words, specify a process that specifically targets the intent of what the owner wants, and not rely on some process that goes nowhere, which is what the moisture testing does. And then you can change another acceptable strategy, change the installation instructions. Yeah, include all 300 pages of the installation instructions from Armstrong, but change it to this. Yep, we like everything, but we're not going to moisture test. Perfectly acceptable strategy. Perfectly acceptable strategy. No issue whatsoever. Remember, you've already required the warranties in part 1, so the warranty's off the table. And now you're telling the project, you're telling the manufacturers, no, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it this way. Why? Because your way doesn't make sense. That's what that language right there does. Puts the power back into the contractor's hands. And then lastly, reference standards the same way. This is what I was going back to for the code side. If it's reference standard spelled out, it says this right here, then it's all 4 pages. Well, moisture test is embedding in F710. The design team could also say, okay, F710 is a great substrate prep for concrete, but the moisture testing, no, we don't want that. Absolutely perfectly acceptable strategy. Know the reference, incorporate only the elements that you want. Be careful of these broad sweeping install per manufacturer's instructions. Be in compliance with, ASTM F710 or ASHRAE, whatever, 90, whatever. It may not be really what you want. So just be careful. And then lastly, unknowns. Here's a big one. Unknowns, the damage of just a few different words, often use an adhesive as recommended by the manufacturer. Everybody says, well, that makes sense. Well, I could tell you right now, project 200,000 square foot project in a hospital in, because remember, that is contract language. That's telling the contractor that he has to use a glue recommended by the manufacturer. That's the legal ramifications. Project we're involved with, resilient sheet, 200,000 square feet hospital, it had that language. The 2 glues recommended by the manufacturer said very clearly, only for porous substrates. And then it had these sentences. If non-porous per F3191, which is the document I happen to have written, bead blast, self-level, so you could use those glues. Nobody involved with that project at any spectrum had any idea that was the ramifications, that they were staring down a $3.50 change order just driven by that top language in red. So I went to the architect and the CA and I said, why don't you change that language to use an adhesive suitable with substrate condition and flooring backing? They're like, why? I showed them. They changed the language as a change order because they're allowed to do that. They did an addendum. They changed that language. The slabs were troweled. They were non-porous. The GC was in control because now the GC was being told to pick a glue appropriate for his substrate surface. He picked a different glue. Same cost as the original specified glue. All warranties conveyed. No change order, no delay. Simply by altering a few words and understanding the ramifications going forward. And again, I know I showed you the one manufacturer said, you can't change you can't use a different adhesive. Well, guess what? That's their instructions. This is a contract document. This language would then trump their installation instructions. So yeah, you absolutely can do that. So remember, a lot of y'all are process people. Think about, the common practice, how things are done. A lot of times they just evolve because everybody does it. But if we really want to make a change, we have to think about what it is, the effect that is really being, we're looking to achieve. What's that desired end state? And the DBIA, Design Build Institute of America, they designed that best practice is really focusing on that outcome. And so we define, from our perspective, our company defines the outcome of that flooring being installed on time, within budget, and warranted against moisture-related flooring failure. That's really what the owner wants. The owner doesn't care about passing an RH test. All right, that's the AI portion. That's the education portion. Any questions so far?
I've got a couple. So what, first off, I'd planned on not getting my blood pressure up today, but I remember the last time you were talking specifications, I couldn't help it. I think you should end with, in conclusion, help the world, go slap a lawyer. And I started thinking, well, is it the lawyer
or manufacturer?
But then the manufacturer's hiring the lawyers to keep them away from the other lawyers. So ultimately it's the lawyer. I'm blaming them. And then I can't.
Are there any lawyers on this call?
No, surely not. And I can't let you mention that you have a high school project in Lubbock without saying Reckham Tech beat Duke on Thursday. I'm a tech grad, so that's it.
Oh, good. There you go. There you go.
Very exciting for me. And I'm just curious, and I think you covered this in one of the other webinars you did for us. What is the point of delineation that you mentioned? Machine troweled concrete's non-porous, and I'm thinking, well, some concrete's super porous, machine troweled's non. Is there a point of delineation? What is the chemical difference? What changes concrete from porous?
Okay, that's a good point. Excellent point. One, age will do it. If it's been covered with flooring for 50 years, like my wife's slab in her basement when we met, we peeled off the old sheet vinyl and we went to replace, she had carpet down there, and then we went to replace it when we redid the basement. And I remember the contractor was using tack strips, and he was going to just hammer it in. Because if you get the right concrete down, you give it a good strike, you can hammer those tack strips in. And he about knocked himself out because he took a mighty swing with his hammer, struck it true. That nail didn't budge, and the hammer rebounded back at his face. And so, because concrete gets stronger through its life, intensifies and hardens, continues to harden, and it had plenty of moisture because there was no vapor retardant in the plastic. So that concrete was, it may have been crappy concrete placed 50 years ago, but after 50 years, in basically 100% humidity, it reached its strength. And so he had to use a Hilti gun with a 22 nail to actually tack. So he asked me, he's like, what did you do to that concrete down there? Like, what do you mean? He's like, and he told the story. So when it comes to concrete, specifically for flooring, there is the expectation, again, for a test, a certain FFFL value. And the way the ACI, I think it's ACI 308, describes how the concrete subcontractor delivers that desired, required, specified flatness, levelness is through multiple passes of a power trowel. And if anybody's ever seen a power trowel working, it doesn't take many passes to go from porous to non-porous. So when you think of porous, go out on your sidewalk, think about a concrete slab that's been floated and broomed. But once a trowel hits it, and that paste is on the top, you go to non-porous pretty darn quick. There's not a whole lag time, a lot of lag time. So then when you think about, again, process-wise, even in design, okay, we got a school going in, we got a hospital going in, we got a courthouse going in. How is that concrete? We're in design right now. How is that concrete going to be finished? That's going to be a power trowel, right? So if we're in Vegas, betting on the come, I'm betting non-porous. I'm betting non-porous.
Yeah.
I'm going to bet non-porous conservatively at first, and then I'm playing with house money. I'm playing house money all the way through, because the way now, if it's a residential slab, heck, no, that's not even true. Because even residential slabs, when it comes down to it, it's just much quicker for them to put them to walk behind power trowel.
Yeah.
So even your residential slabs are going to be non-porous. So in a home, like I put an epoxy on my garage. In my own home, all the concrete, interior concrete, and the garage was every bit of my footprint of my house was non-porous. You go to the sidewalk, put a drop of water. It's got the broom, so that's going to pull the water apart, and it's got the pits because it was only floated and then broom finished. It was never troweled. That really tightens up that surface matrix. That's what really drives the difference.
It's the surface matrix.
Correct.
So I'm thinking, so back to my, obviously you are on a mission to help concrete specs and flooring and change the moisture and flooring industry. And I'm on my stucco mission. I'm thinking about this 3-coat stucco and how porous is it going to be as water cascades into this.
But the other thing too, when you think about that particular where you were just pointing, once that area gets compromised in any way, you can't see it. The only way it's ever going to manifest is from the inside.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally a hidden ticking time bomb, not an if, a when, that is going to fail. Now, granted, your climate is more conducive. The person says, well, we only get so much rain, per year, but yeah, you're saying we get most of that within 2 days. When that fails, the other thing too, you've got a couple different planes going on there. And so we're talking, assuming that stucco doesn't get cracked from a little bit of expansion and contraction and just the other elements of the building elements of the house. So if that stucco gets compromised in any way, then what you're talking about goes up exponentially, just because of the way they designed it.
Yeah. Well, that's,
and they're slanting the water right to that area right there.
It's crazy. So my last plug, please reach out to me. Let me come talk to you and your staff about stucco. And then everyone, you will get a PDF of Dean's slides. So super nice guy, always real timely on responses, and just, man, he knows specifications and concrete like nobody's business. I hate to let people know you're helpful, Dean, because you might hear from a few of them, but I'm
No,
sure
I
they
don't mind
won't.
at all.
Okay.
I mean, I've had people reach out to me and then I won't hear from them for 9 months and they'll reach out to me again. And, invariably working through it, I learned something. So what you said, yeah, we want to sell product and things like that. Of course, we have an ad mix that goes in the concrete that addresses this, but we're trying to do it from literally my overarching altruistic goal. Draw the sword, fight the moisture testing mafia, and change the industry.
Amen.
The fact that I can do it and make a living selling a product is all the greater. But what gets me excited is that when I get a response, when I get people blood pressure up, when I get them agitated, when I get them going, wait, what the hell? The guy said yesterday, he goes, so they're completely, basically your conclusion too, they're completely protected. I said, you don't know the half of it yet, because I was still like a 30-minute mark. Getting that realization to see come home. Well, even now, I didn't talk about my product. I mean, people, if I can show that I can help understand a problem, then people are more likely to come to us for a solution.
Right. Good point.
That's what we focus on. We don't focus on like, hey, let me give you an hour of my product. I try to really get you to understand a particular problem and then build towards how you can solve it. So that's our goal. That's our drive. That's our message. That's how we approach things. Our product is a side note. It's just it's an accessory.
Yeah.
That brings our message home, I would say. So.
Right on. Well, thanks for joining us so much, everybody. And Dean, I can't thank you enough. You'll get a course evaluation from everyone, from Kathy, and then I'll get you, Dean, if you'll send me a PDF of the slides, I might as well send it to everybody if that's all right.
Yeah, I'll do it right now. Since I got the phone, I'll save this PDF and shoot it over to you.
Okay, sounds great. And we're already 14 minutes over, so I'll give you the last word, Deans, and we'll end the webinar.
Thanks so much, everybody. Y'all have a great one. Love Texas, and thank you so much for being on board.
Thanks again. Bye, everybody.